All right, let's go ahead and get started. Just start engaging. So happy to have you guys. Really excited. I know Luke and I, we've been doing these virtual meetings over the last couple of months since COVID hit, and we're just really appreciative of everyone that shows up and engages with the group. Really excited to get back and physically see all you guys soon, but hopefully this is a good substitute. So today we have Craig Curelop. Curelop, is it?
No, you said it right the first time, man. One of the first ones.
Curelop?
Curlop. You said it right the first time. Yeah.
Curelop. Okay. Yeah. So it's Craig Curelop. He's the author of this book, The House Hacking Strategy. That's published by BiggerPockets. For those of you who don't know what BiggerPockets is, it's the largest real estate investor website in the world. They provide phenomenal information for investors, large and small. So I'm just really excited to have him here to talk about the house hacking strategy, which is a super powerful way to maximize your ability to achieve financial freedom. So Craig, do you want to kind of introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your journey, I guess?
Start with that. Can you all hear me? Can you see me now?
Mm-hmm.
I see you.
I was on the wrong. Can you hear me? I was on the wrong internet for some reason. I was on like an Xfinity one rather than my personal Wi-Fi. Okay, that should be good.
So yeah, do you want to just go ahead and introduce yourself and talk a little bit about how you got into real estate and various other things along those lines?
Yeah, for sure. So, I cut out a little bit there, so I'm not sure what you ended on. But as far as my history goes, I was working out in Silicon Valley at a job that I hated, making great money, making over $100,000 a year at 22, 23 years old. Not a bad life to most people, living in the San Francisco, going out every weekend, going on vacations, all this stuff. Like, for the typical American, it's a great life. But really, I never had to turn work off, right? Like I had to work 60, 70, 80 hours a week. And the straw that broke the camel's back was when I was down in Big Sur with my girlfriend at the time. And I got an email at Sunday at like 5 p.m. saying that I had to get this memo out by Monday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern time, which is 5 a.m. Pacific. So basically and this was the last night I was able to spend with my girlfriend because we were both going away. And so that was like, man, there's got to be more to life than this. There's no way I can live my life just sitting behind a cubicle for the rest of my life. So stumbled upon BiggerPockets, thought about real estate investing, and then, haven't really turned back. Did a bunch of research for about 6 months, moved to Denver, got a job at BiggerPockets, was inspired by everybody and all of you guys. And really within 2 months of me moving to Colorado, I had purchased my first property, started house hacking it. If you've read the book or know the story, you know that I, bought that duplex. It was 2 one-bed, 1-baths. I rented out the top, lived in the bottom, and I rented out my room on Airbnb while I slept behind the curtain in the cardboard box. And that's kind of like, that was my start, right? And I knew it was kind of crazy, but I was making, $800 to $1,000 a month on top of what I was saving prior to that. And that allowed me to get the second and the third house hack, and it just provided a foundation for me to really grow. So, yeah, that's it in a nutshell. I can, my story can last longer than that, but I don't want to bore you guys. So,
yeah, that's exciting. Yeah. So as far as the house hacking strategy goes, can you talk about some of the benefits associated with it? I know there's a lot of people out here who may already know what the house hacking strategy is, but there's also quite a few that probably don't as well. So if you can kind of elaborate.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure. So my strategy. Basically, the house hacking strategy is not my strategy, but the whole idea is that you can buy a property for a low percent down, typically 3 to 5% down. You live in one unit, you rent out the other units. The other units pay your mortgage, and you get to live for free. And I suspect that your rent or your mortgage is going to be your highest expense. It's a third of the average American's budget. So just by that, you're going to be saving 33% more than what you would have been saving originally. And so that's like huge. And that is like the most efficient way to get to financial independence is by house hacking. And not only that, but if you want to get into real estate, it's also an easy way to just kind of gain some landlording experience and learn how to be landlorded, but you don't have to go far because it's literally your house. And so you buy the first one, you're able to save $1,000 or $2,000 a month after that first one, right? That's another $20,000 over the course of a year. And then you're able to get the second one, right? And then you can kind of see how that goes. Each property, at least in my area, I live in Denver, cash flows about $800 to $1,000 a month. right? And so, after 3-4 years, you got $3,000-4,000 a month of cash flow coming in, right? Not bad. You can see how you can achieve financial independence just using this strategy over the course of 5 to 7 years.
So I mean, that's great. I mean, I love the house hacking strategy. I'm currently house hacking myself, so I advocate for it all the time. So as far as I guess for someone who's brand new to real estate investing, they think that the house hacking strategy is the right way for them. How do they identify a property that may be a good fit for them, or is maybe a good house hack itself?
Yeah, so we talk in the book about this comfort continuum, which basically is like, as you have, it's like a spectrum, and on one end of the spectrum is comfortability, the next end is profitability. As you move towards profitability, you get less comfortable, and as you move towards comfortability, you get less profitable. So you got to find out where you will land on that spectrum, and then decide on what strategy you want to pursue. As an agent and as kind of someone who helps a lot of people house hack, I always say you want to butt up against that profitability comfort zone as much as you can. And so if you have a family and you have kids and you're like, there's no way I'm sharing houses with other individuals, but why not get a house with maybe a mother-in-law suite, or maybe the basement you can renovate into kind of its own little unit, and you separate that off and you can just rent out your space that you're not living in, right? If you are young and single and you don't care about living with roommates, buy a single family house, live in one room, rent all the other rooms. That tends to be some of the most profitable ways. And if you're super minimalist, hell, buy a van or get in a trailer and live out of a camper and rent out your house. Right? That's another strategy that I've seen people do, and it's it's very fruitful.
So yeah, I remember in the book you mentioned that one of your buddies had a camper or something just parked out front of his house, just rented out the house to some other people just to kind of allow it to cash flow. So as far as the house hacking strategy goes, you mentioned some low financing options. I think that's one of the major benefits of the house hacking strategy, is that most investment properties tend to require a little bit higher down payment, generally in that 20% to 25% range. So can you talk about, you mentioned 3.5% down. Does that reference what exact loan does that reference?
Yeah, so I said there's 3% to 5% down. So the 3.5% down is the FHA loan, which a lot of people use. It allows you to buy a 1 to 4 unit property with 3.5% down. There are stricter guidelines because the government and the Federal Housing Administration, the FHA, wants to make sure that the house is livable and that you are able to live there for a year. So it's a little bit like the appraisals are a little bit more strict and all of that kind of stuff with the FHA. Now, if you go the single family route and rent by the room, or you Airbnb out your basement and you're buying a single family house, I would recommend doing the 3 or 5% down conventional. 3% you can do on your first one. After that, you can only do 5%. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, it's less strict. Two, the PMI burns off itself, so you don't actually have to refinance to burn off the PMI. After like 7 or 8 years, the PMI just goes away. Number 3 is shoot, what did I say? Did I say the appraisals aren't as strict?
Yes, you did.
Okay, appraisals aren't as strict. The conventional loan, and you can use them over and over again. You don't need to keep refinancing after each one. So it's just super helpful, and you just have to live there for 1 year. That's kind of the only stipulation that they have.
So as far as that strategy as well, how does that apply to properties that need some work? So let's say you identify a property, you think it'd be a good fit for a house hack, but maybe it needs a little bit more work in order to get it ready. Or what are really your options at that point?
Yeah, so a house can need work and it will still pass the FHA and the owner-occupied, criteria. If it's livable, it will pass. So it needs running water, it needs heat, it needs, there has to be 4 walls and a roof and flooring and no holes in the floor, stuff like that. But it can be outdated cabinets and counters. That's not going to matter. It can have cat pee in the carpets. That doesn't matter. The paint can be off. It doesn't that stuff doesn't matter as long as it just has to be in livable condition.
Okay, so what I'll do now is I guess we'll go ahead and open it up to questions. I know there's probably quite a few questions you guys are interested in asking Craig, and this is a great opportunity for you to ask and kind of get some feedback.
Craig, I got a question for you. I'm interested specifically in your first deal, and we were just talking about renovations, and I've renovated quite a few properties, and I've made a bunch of mistakes along the way. I'm curious about the first property that you bought. How much renovations were required once you acquired that property for you to be able to rent it out in house hack? Was it minimal stuff, or was it flooring, carpet, paint? What kinds of stuff were you looking at?
So it was actually nothing. It was totally turnkey. It was kind of like a flipped duplex when I did it. So yeah, it was like all beautiful new quartz countertops. It looked really nice. And it was at a decent price, really close to the office in an up and coming area. And so, yeah, I mean, I bought that property for $385,000 in June of 2017.
Okay.
And, last October 2019, it appraised for $550. So literally I did nothing and got almost $200,000 out of it. And that's like, I got lucky, right? Like I kind of knew that was the path of progress, but it's always speculation when you're trying to time stuff like that. But, the numbers worked. It did cash flow. And I was, a mile and a half from my office, really close to downtown Denver. I was just like, this place has to appreciate. And so, I put myself in a position to be lucky, and I got lucky.
So you mentioned the area. That's another thing that I think you talk about in your book, is identifying an area where you think would be a good fit as far as a house hack goes. Do you want to kind of elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, so I'm a huge fan of path of progress. And what that means is there's areas in your city, I'm sure, or town that are kind of developing. They're kind of turning around. And the housing in those areas are probably too expensive. And so likely in 5 years, 3 to 5 years, that expansion is just going to continue to move in the direction that it's moving, because, the opposite direction is just way too expensive. And so my strategy is just like plant myself like a mile to a mile and a half outside of where all the building is happening, in hopes that eventually I'll just be in the way of the building and they'll just come through and capture my stuff in the next 7 to 10 years. If there's a recession and building stops, then it might take a little bit longer, but if you got to make sure the numbers cash flow and you can hold it for as long as you can.
So with that house that you were just talking about, you did a refinance, you said, after 2 years. Was there a reason for the refinance that you did on that one?
So I actually did not refinance. I just pulled a HELOC on it. So that's why I got that appraisal. I am actually in the middle of refinancing right now. So I don't know what it would have. I mean, if we had this call a week later, I could tell you what the appraisal is, but I don't know it. But yeah,
on it now.
Yeah, because now I'm doing a true refi. I'm going to get the FHA loan back, and that way next year I'm going to probably use the FHA loan again, and I'm going to probably, I've been butting up against that profitability spectrum for quite a while. I think next year I'm going to take a bump down to the comfortability side and maybe have my own unit. That feels uncomfortable for me, but we'll see.
You're not going to put up a curtain and just have, in your kitchen?
I mean, depends on the size, but maybe, who knows?
Awesome.
So this box, you said you had a box and you're renting your house on Airbnb. Is that what you said?
And it was like a cardboard room divider.
Nice.
It was literally like, I thought I was getting something a little bit fancier, but it came in and I was like, whatever, I'll just make it work. But it's like, imagine like a giant cardboard box painted black. And it was like, it was kind of like one of those, like, do you remember like in middle school and high school, you did those science projects where like you had the 3-fold boards?
Yeah.
Yeah, like that's kind of what it looked like, but it was all black. And so like I just put that up, and then I had a curtain that I paper clipped to that, and then just slid it back and forth. So
that's
super
a true
janky.
Airbnb, man. That's what Airbnb was created for. You know what I mean? Like originally.
Yeah, that exactly. But usually the guests were sleeping on the couch, not the host. But
you could charge a little bit more, right? You're trying to make that profitability.
100%.
Less comfortable, a little more profitable.
Yeah, I figured, you live like no one else now, so you can live like no one else later. That quote just kept going through my head when I was doing that. So
that's awesome.
I love it, man.
We had a few questions in the chat box, so I'll just go ahead and ask you. One of the things that was asked was to restate the loan name with the 5% down. I'm assuming that's just the conventional side.
Yep. It's just 5% conventional. No special name for it. But you do have to live there. Conventional kind of confuses people because people think 20% down conventional. This is 5% down conventional, but it is an owner-occupied loan.
And do you have to have anything special as far as credit score or anything like that in order to qualify for a 5% down loan, or how does that work?
I mean, your credit score has to be reasonable. Like if you're, I don't know, if you're below 600, it might be hard to get it. You'd have to just talk to your lender. I've always had a good credit score, so I've never really had to worry about it. When I was doing my research, I know FHA allows for a bit lower of a credit score. And so that is another reason for an FHA. So if you're hovered around that 550, 560 mark, you still might be able to get an FHA loan, whereas you wouldn't be able to get that conventional.
Sure. So can you explain the difference? This is actually from Darren. Can you explain the difference between refinance and HELOC?
Yeah, so a HELOC basically means I'm going to keep my current mortgage on the property, but over a certain period of time, typically a year or more, my property has appreciated to the point where I have much more than 20%. Like, so for example, like my loan balance on that property is somewhere around like 350,000, but the value is 550. So that $200,000 of equity is much higher than 20% of the overall value of the house. And so what a HELOC is basically I'm unlocking that $200,000, and the bank says, yeah, we'll lend on 80% of that extra cushion. And well, so I got a $75,000 HELOC that I can now go use to, buy the next property and unlock that equity to then go buy more properties or do whatever. A refinance, on the other hand, that basically takes your one mortgage and totally replace it with another mortgage. So a lot of people refinance when they want to lower their payment because, they would have paid principal down over a few years. And now instead of having, a $380,000 mortgage over the course of 30 years, I'll have a $350,000 mortgage over the course of 30 years. And so my monthly payment will be that much lower. But the real reason why I'm refinancing is so I can unlock my FHA loan again, because you can only have one out at a time. That way next year, when it comes time to buy the next one, I can move on it.
Definitely. So another question that was asked is related to rehab. So how do you finance a rehab if one is necessary on a property? Can that be pulled into an existing long-term loan, or is that going to be out-of-pocket expense on your part?
I usually just do out-of-pocket expense. For me, it's just easier. People talk about the 203K loan, which is basically like an FHA loan, but you can lump the construction costs into it. It's just like, it sounds great in theory, but it's actually a huge pain in the butt in terms of like, you've got to get 3 contractor bids. All of them have to be willing to do all the extra paperwork with the 203K loan. It has to come inspected. And contractors just don't want to do that, especially if they're busy. So you're going to either end up with a crappy contractor. It's going to take longer. And it's just like, it just sounds way better than it actually is, in my opinion. So I kind of just, I'll for my first one, that's why I didn't do much of a rehab, because I didn't have much additional cash. So I was just like, I just want to get in, start getting some passive income, start saving on rent. But as you collect more and more of these house hacks, you're going to start making more and more money as you progress through your career, as your real estate investing progresses. And at that point, when you start having $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 extra, you don't mind putting a little bit more work into each property to, make it look like the way you want it to look.
And yeah, I really like that point that you made, because I think starting out getting properties that don't need as much work is going to be way easier because of like what you said. Financing it is the cheapest financing that you can get. You only have to put down, 3 to 5%. So I think that's a really good tip for people. Put down minimal. Start with a house that doesn't need that much renovations, that will still cash flow, and then you can move on to those renovations as you get farther into your career and more experience and all the rest of it. That's a great tip.
Exactly. And when you buy a house, you need to have a little bit of reserves, because I've never met someone who buys a house and doesn't have a few things go wrong when they move in, especially if it hasn't been lived in a while. Like just stuff you don't think to notice, whether it's like, the shower doesn't reach the back of the sink, or like the pressure, like just stuff you don't even think to test and the inspector missed. So just, expect those things, and they're all kind of part of the process.
Yeah. I mean, when I bought my property, literally like after we had to renovate this apartment and everything. And literally about a week or two after I moved in, my water heater blew out. And so that's $1,000 expense right there. So yeah, definitely keep some reserves. I would say another question I had, which is something that I always get asked, is that when people talk about house hacking, one of the biggest downsides that they think is related to managing a property. So dealing with tenants is always something that I hear is like, oh, how do you deal with your tenants? Like that sort of stuff. Can you talk a little bit about your experience and maybe provide some feedback as far as just your experience?
Yeah, I mean, Overall, my experience has been fine. I just make sure to screen everybody, run credit scores, background checks, and all of that. And, and then you meet them as you show them the house, and within the first few minutes whether you want to rent to them or not and live with them. It's kind of different if you're doing a separate unit versus actually living with you. I know when you're actually living with them, you can be a little bit more, I don't want to say like discriminatory, but like, you can just say, yeah, you remind me of you don't have to like abide by the fair housing laws as much. You should, but like if someone reminds you of someone that beat you up in high school, you can like, that can be a reason as to why you don't want to live with someone. Whereas like if you're actually just not living the property, you need to have like clear cut guidelines to make sure that you're not discriminating in any sort of way, even if you don't intend to. But yeah, I mean, you just got to screen your tenants. That's the biggest thing. Credit score, background check, call landlord, call previous landlords, call employer, get pay stubs, get as much information as you can from them. And once they fill it all out, then, that's when you know.
And I always tell people too, don't be in a hurry to rent out your unit I always feel like the mistakes that I made renting units was when I was in a hurry to rent it because I was afraid I wasn't going to rent it. It's like, oh gosh, it's been 2 weeks. I got to rent it. And then you just pick someone and then it's a nightmare.
Yeah, that's I heard a quote. I forget who said it, but it's, the only thing worse than no tenant is a bad tenant. So definitely take your time.
Yeah, sure.
We had a few more questions here. Said, how does the 1% or 2% for cash flow apply when house hacking?
It doesn't. I hate those rules so much. I don't know how you guys feel, but in Denver, people always say, oh, you can't get the 1% rule here. I'm like, well, the 1% rule takes into account two things. It takes into account rent and it takes into account property price, right? Like there's so much more that goes into your monthly payment, taxes, insurance, rehab costs, age of the house, all of these things that you kind of need to take into account. And I'm not one to like go dig it deep into numbers, right? I like, if you've read the book, it's like, I've got rent, your monthly payment, which includes taxes and insurance, and reserves, which is kind of a combination of the location, age of the house, and size of the house. But it really all depends. A 1% rule is in some areas, that's a rule of thumb and it works. But in like, I know in Denver, it just very rarely works. And if you're going to look for the 1% rule, you're never going to invest. So don't let that be an excuse as to why you don't invest in real estate.
Definitely. Yeah, I would say here in Louisville, it's probably more applicable. Our property prices are definitely not nearly as high as they are in Denver for sure. So as far as the insurance policy goes for a house hacking property, are they going to be very similar to what you would see if you're just an owner occupant in a single family home, for example?
Yeah, it's a homeowner's loan. I would just tell your insurance agent exactly what you're going to do, and just don't lie to them. Don't skirt around the bush. Just tell them exactly what you want to do, and they'll find some sort of product that satisfies what you need. It's also helpful if you can get your tenants to get renter's insurance. I highly encourage it, but I don't require it. But I, let them know of the consequences if they don't get it.
Yeah, I require it. So.
You require it? Maybe I should require it. I've never paid for it when I was renting, so I was like, whatever.
It's so cheap too. I think it's like $6 a month or something. So I mean, I've never had to push back on it. On Cozy, Cozy is a property management software that's free. It allows you to interact with your tenants, which is awesome, by the way. If you get a chance to download it, definitely do that. But there's an option there for you to require renter's insurance, and they'll send you confirmation once they have it. So
it's awesome.
Food for thought.
Yeah, I should do it.
You have them? No. So they were asking a question. Do you have them sign a waiver if they don't get renter's insurance?
No. Honestly, I feel like I'm pretty stringent in like screening tenants for the most part, but when it comes to actual like doing it, I'm pretty laid back, which I actually have a property manager now, which literally saves me time and money and stress. So, once you get to kind of a certain number, you're just like kind of over it and you just want to focus on building rather than maintaining. And that's a kind of a good time to just hire the property manager.
Yeah, I struggle with that, man, to be honest. I want to get a property manager, but I keep not. And,
yeah, dude.
I really think it's up a lot, man.
Once you get one, you like can't go back. It's like, wow, I just do nothing and money comes into my bank account each month. It really feels nice.
Do you have any properties that are Airbnb specific right now, as far as like a unit in a, duplex or anything like that that's only for Airbnb?
I did, but then I actually transferred them to full-time rentals with COVID.
Yeah.
And it kind of like, I was thinking about doing it for a while anyway, and COVID just kind of made me actually forced my hand to do it. Just because I kind of just want some consistency, and I want to understand exactly how much passive income I'm getting each month.
Right.
And yeah, I don't know, just it made sense in my head at the time.
Totally. The COVID thing threw a wrench in the spokes for sure, man.
Yeah, for sure.
Tough times for Airbnb. Tough time to start one for sure too.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the questions they had was, how many units do you think triggers getting a property manager?
Honestly, when managing a property starts getting in the way of money making high dollar activities for you, that's when it's time. So, I'd say managing a property is not a high dollar per value task, but it's fairly easy to do because most times you're just kind of sitting there doing nothing. But, when you're like really stressing to get a plumber to fix a leak, and that's kind of like the time, you'll know. It's more, I don't know, for me, it was more of like all right, this is stressing me out way more than it can. If I didn't do this, but instead went and like closed a couple more deals as an agent, I'd make way more money. So it makes sense for me to just, outsource this part of the business.
Yeah.
So I'm not too exactly sure. Eric, could you clarify that question? Because right now it says, how long do you let your tenants live at the property before offering them the opportunity to renew their lease or resisting the property?
So, I mean, basically, I try to have relisting. I think you need to say.
Okay.
Yeah. So I probably autocorrect or something. So what I do is basically like I try to have at least in Denver, people don't really like to move in the winter because it sucks, and I think that's for most parts of the country. And so I usually have all of my leases try to expire sometime between April and September. And if they don't expire in that time frame, I'll just make it a 3 or 6 month lease until it does. And then I'll, ask them 30 or 60 days before, hey, do you want to renew? If they say no, then the search begins. If they say yes, then you have them sign a new lease, and, you'd make it for another year or another few months or whatever makes you feel comfortable.
This is something Luke does, which I think is pretty cool. Do you offer them to sign a longer term lease than 1 year?
I don't specifically offer them to, because with rent by the room, it just gets a little, I don't know, a year makes me feel a little uncomfortable. But because I did have someone sign for a 2-year lease once, and they made it 6 months, and we mutually decided to end the lease. So
I could see that if you were in the same building, like same unit as somebody, a long lease would probably be a bad idea.
Yeah. But I mean, it's for sure for the security purposes. What do you do, Luke? Do you just say?
I do 2-year leases on all the houses that I have, but those are houses, they're larger units, and I have one 4-plex, and those are 1 bedroom, 1 bath. I do 6-month leases on those because it's, small stuff, and I just go month to month after that because I'm trying to be flexible. The units are not that nice, and I figure maybe you'll keep people longer if you're easy to work with, and whatever. So that's what I do in my 4-plex, but everything else is 2-year leases, and that works out really well because then, you keep somebody for at least 2 years. So
right. Yeah. I mean, I like that. Maybe you have to give it a shot.
I think it works better depending on the size of, obviously
like houses.
Room, I think houses, it gets a little easier.
Yeah. Like single family houses. Yeah. Cause those are the ones where people stay there. They're forever homes for some people, right? They just rent their forever home, and it's 20 years they're there. So
I bought a house last April that the people have been there for 19 years. So, and they're still there.
Bad. Treat them well. Yeah. Treat them well.
Yeah.
So, another question we have from Darren. He says, do you need the cash flow to be positive to invest? Let's say you were in a good neighborhood in a coastal city like Los Angeles, where the appreciation is higher than most cities. Would you not invest if you were breaking even or losing $100 to $200 a month in cash flow per unit? And this is something you talked about in your book. So if you want to kind of elaborate on that.
Yeah. So I think Depends on what your goal is, right? If your goal is financial independence, paying $100 to $200 a month does not help you achieve your goal of financial independence. If you're financially independent and you're making $10,000 a month, but you only need $7,000 a month to be financially independent, well, then yeah, maybe it makes sense to invest in that. You're still financially independent with this negative $100, $200 a month of cash flow, but in 5 to 7 years, you might see hundreds of thousands of dollars in appreciation because, what I always say is cash flow will make you financially independent, but appreciation will make you rich. So, I always say get financially independent through cash flow first, and then you can start taking bigger risks on the appreciation plays.
So
I think that's a great point. That's kind of like what I was doing. We bought cheap houses in the beginning to cash flow, and then now I'm focusing on some higher dollar stuff. Not anything too crazy yet, but I'm looking to go more and more higher up. So I think that's that's great advice.
Yeah, that's perfect.
That's another thing you mentioned in your book, which I'll elaborate on as well. So in the case where you're living in one of the units, but you're not totally covering your mortgage 100%, you did an analysis where you said, well, if let's say you're not covering your entire mortgage, rent, or whatever else, but let's say you're at $500 out of pocket. But if you were to rent another property down the street, it would cost you $1,500. There's still a net positive there, right? And you have other well.
Yep, exactly. Just because you're not covering your mortgage while you're living there does not mean that you're cash flow negative. If when you move out, you can rent out your space for more than what you're negative, then it's a cash flow positive property, right? And so people do that all the time, just to save on rent. They're paying $300 a month instead of $1,300 a month, and that's $1,000 a month. That's still a significant difference.
Definitely. Okay, so Jim Young is asking, does house hacking mean you moving every 2 to 5 years for you?
I move every year. That means something. That means something that's different for everybody, right? Like I'm pretty aggressive and I move every year. Some people move every 2 years. You can do what's called a live and flip, where you buy kind of a distressed property. You live in there for 2 years. You fix it up while you're living there. Then you sell it, and you're able to sell it for, if you're single, $250,000 of your capital gains is tax free. If you're married, that's $500,000. And so, like in a place like Louisville, Kentucky, I'm sure very rarely do you hit that $250,000, $500,000 mark. Even in Denver, you don't really hit that. So, that's a strategy that a lot of people do. But with this house hacking thing, the power in it is being able to get a new one every year and add $1,000 a month of passive income each year, and do that as soon as possible. So I don't really look for the best deal. I just look for a deal when my time comes.
Awesome.
Yeah, and so you had mentioned earlier about the conventional loans that you get, and I believe you said that with the FHA there's a limit of one that you can have out at a time. But with the conventional, you said there's no limit if you're buying it as an owner occupant. Is that correct? Am I understanding?
Well, there's a limit of like 10 or 9 or 10, and so
does that still apply though if you're going to buy it as your personal residence to live in? Do you know?
I believe so. I believe that you can't have more than 9 or 10 personal mortgages out on like your personal. Now you can open up an LLC and probably have as many as you want, right? But yeah, and so like basically you have 10 loans. That is the cheapest possible financing. Now if you've got a spouse or something like that, you can have 10 in each of your names. So between the two of you, you can have 20. So that is a powerful way to do, take advantage of that situation if you do have a significant other that you're good with.
So the debt to income, you just got to make sure you qualify with debt to income for that, depending on how many mortgages you have. I've run into this problem before. Usually I do cash out refinances, and recently I've been doing more commercial loans than the other ones, but they're just so much cheaper to do it this way, where you're getting the 30-year amortization, you're getting a fixed interest rate at 4% or something. It's unbeatable. So
yep, you can't beat those. So
all right, we got another question. What factors do you take into consideration before purchasing your properties, like your next property?
My biggest thing is flexibility. So I like to be able to rent it out by the room. So I like to have a 5-bed, 2+ bath house that has at least 2,000 square feet or more. And this is in Denver, right? So, this property type might not be the same out where you guys are. Ideally, I like a 5-bed, 3-bath, 5 or more bed, 3 or more bath at 2,000 square feet or more. And that's usually enough for the rent by the room. I like to have the back door or a side door or something that leads right to the stairs to go downstairs, so that you can easily wall or door off from the upstairs, so you can easily have a second unit. And then you can easily add a kitchen or a whatever down there to kind of make it a duplex. And so I love the ones where you can kind of make them a single family turned into like a non-conforming duplex, because you get the single family house purchase price, but you can get the duplex type rent. So those are the ones that tend to work the best, and property managers aren't afraid to rent out the 2 separate units. I've got one that does rent by the room now over here where I am, but in case he ever goes away, I've got, then I also can split it up into 2 units. I can Airbnb one and rent the other. There's just so much flexibility that I really value flexibility, because, in times like COVID or whatever, we don't know what's going to happen. And so you want to be able to adjust quickly.
Definitely. So you mentioned the non-conforming duplex. That's an interesting strategy I've never really heard about. So how does that work as far as, I guess, regulations or anything like that? Does it matter?
So yeah, you don't really basically a lot of the work here in Denver is not permitted. And I think a lot of places all around here is not permitted, just because it's such a pain to go through the city to pull the permits. It costs more time. It's more of a pain for the contractors. So you're not you're supposed to pull the permits, right? If the city's, and I should tell you, you got to pull permits, but usually in here you see that people don't pull permits, and I will buy houses that no one has pulled a permit on. And so what happens is if I pull permits and call someone just to do this little thing, I'm going to have to redo the entire basement to make it up to code, which is going to cost me, instead of $5,000 to just do what I want to do, it's going to cost me $30,000 or $40,000. So I decide usually just to not pull the permits and, take that risk. You're not going to get arrested. You just will get a fine, and they might issue you a stop work order if they find out. But usually they only do that if it's on the outside of the house, because they're not going to look in your house. But again, up to you whether you want to take that risk or not. I've been taking it.
Seems to be working. So it's just an interesting strategy I've never really thought about. So we got another question. My house needs some work. I have a parquet floor on the first floor and basement, 2,400 square feet, 2-story property. Carpet on the second floor needs to be replaced. From your experience, what's the best improvement from an ROI perspective? My house appraises around $315,000 to $325,000.
I mean, yeah, the best ROI is going to be if you have room to add beds. That's the easiest ROI. If you have a sunroom or something where you can actually add square footage to the house, that's probably the second best. In terms of just cosmetic work, floors, paint, kitchens, and bathrooms would sell places. So, I mean, those would be kind of the big things. I think I had an Instagram post recently too that has kind of the top 5 investments for ROI. Windows are also pretty big, but they're expensive. So I don't know if the ROI is probably not great, but it does add value when you have new windows.
So one thing I want to ask, this is more of just curious on my part. One of the things is, and this is something that I struggle with my girlfriend, is that how do you get both partners on the same page as far as getting into a house hack? Because, I mean, your ideas may be completely different, but maybe if you can elaborate a little bit on that dynamic, because I know you elaborated a little bit on it in the book as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard, right? You a relationship is all about kind of some give and take. And so you're not going to be able, if your girlfriend is probably not going to live behind a curtain, right? And so that's out of the question. But maybe you can convince her to rent out the basement on Airbnb. That's reasonable. You have your own space, all of that kind of stuff. You can show her the numbers over time and how you'll be able to spend unlimited time with her going forward without having to work. And you can be fully present when traveling and all that kind of stuff, right? So tempt her or him with the, the results. And then you kind of show them the math, how to get there. Because emotion, what is it? Facts tell, stories sell. So sell them or her with a story, and then you can explain how to get there with the facts. And maybe it's, maybe you rent out the bottom with Airbnb, and maybe you rent another room out in your house to a friend that you both know, right? You have to give them a little bit of discount. Maybe instead of charging them $700 for a room, you charge them $500, right? Maybe that's not a bad idea. So, you just have to figure out what works for the both of you. And if she's totally against it, I mean, then you make a decision, or I don't know. I'm not going to tell you to break up with your girlfriend, but how important is it to you to be doing this versus the relationship you have? And if your goals don't align that much, is that something that's going to affect your relationship in the long run? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah, Luke, you did something similar, right, with your first property, correct?
Yeah, it was a 4-bedroom, 2-bath. We just moved in one of our friends that we actually went to college together. I did. Me and him went together to college, and he lived there for the first maybe year and a half or so of our marriage. But it was great. I mean, it worked out, and once we started having kids, that's when we had to move out. So, yeah, and that was my house hack situation. It was great though, man. I mean, he covered a large portion of the mortgage. We still paid money to live there, but it was awesome. So
That's great.
yeah.
One kind of related to the previous question about the ROI for different things. Would you recommend, from a flooring perspective, carpet or wood?
No, I would recommend. Yeah, I would recommend LVP.
LVP.
LVP is going to be a little bit more than carpet, but it's just like indestructible and looks pretty good. I always say, like, if you move in and the carpet's okay, let it go until it dies, until it rots, and then move it in with LVP. It's pretty much indestructible, great tenant proof. It looks really good, and it's not as expensive as wood. So I would, go with that for sure.
Okay, so another question. Have you had to deal with an eviction with a tenant not paying in one of the rooms, either in a home or where you were living in or not?
I actually have not. So I've been pretty fortunate. Again, it all kind of comes down to tenant screening. So I've been fortunate. I don't have much to say there. I do think the eviction does get a little bit tricky when you do rent by the room, because I don't think the sheriff is going to come and knock on someone's room door. It's going to be more like, okay, so you're going to have to kind of work that out between you and them. Oftentimes, I have had to kick someone out before, and the way I did it was I just offered them. It was soon after they moved in, so I offered them security deposit, their rent back, and $500 to just like get out in the next week, and that usually it worked for 2 people that I had to kick out. So
yeah, that's good.
Yeah, that's a good strategy. I've heard that being used a lot. Cash for keys, essentially.
Cash. Yep, exactly right.
Just get them out, and if you think about it, it's a better strategy that way anyways, because otherwise they're just going to be dragging it out with legal fees, whatever else. And in the long run, you're probably going to end up spending way over what you were offering the person versus just giving them cash and saying, look, just get out of here. It's going to be better for you because there's no eviction on your record. And I mean, I can rent the unit out and actually make some cash flow. So
that's exactly right.
That's a great strategy. So, any more questions as far as the house hack is concerned? We got one more. Let's see. Where do you list your properties? Which ones have worked the best?
Facebook Marketplace is probably the best one. But I also list on, so if they're regular rentals, I'll list on Facebook Marketplace. I list on Zillow, Trulia, HotPads, Realtor. Basically, I just literally like go on every single site and list them. Because it's pretty easy once you just get one listing up. It's pretty much just the copy and paste and upload pictures. The more, you can't really have you like. There's the book called 4 Disciplines of Execution, and it kind of talks about like lead metrics versus lag metrics. And in this case, a lag metric would be like your vacancy, right? Like your tenant, how good is your vacancy? And your lead metric for that you can actually control is how many places do you list your place? How many eyes can you get on your listing? And that will likely give you the most leads, which will then effectively give you the best tenant. So I just try to put it on as many places as possible. Again, there's tons. I mentioned a few there, but yeah, Trulia, Realtor, HotPads. For the rooms ones, I'll add a Roomster and Roomies in there. But yeah, just as many as possible. You Google it. You Google like all of the ones you can find and just go that way.
And then another thing I'd ask is, from an application standpoint, what do you use a preset application that you've just kind of standardized and everything, or what exactly do you look for within that application?
I just use Cozy. Cozy's great. I love Cozy. It makes things way easier. Application, credit report, background check, all through Cozy. You can list on a few sites through Cozy as well. Cozy's awesome.
That's what I use too. So
It's cozy.co for those that don't know. So if you search for cozy.com, you're not going to get the right thing. It's cozy.co. And I'm a huge advocate for it. I love it. They do. But all right. So I think we've kind of exhausted all these questions. I mean, first off, I mean, I just want to really thank you, Craig, for coming on. And do you want to kind of tell everyone about how they can get in contact with you if they ever have any questions related to the house hacking strategy? I mean, he also wrote this book as well. So if you get a chance, definitely check it out. It's something that's, I mean, it's got some really good information. It's well written. I would highly recommend it. So definitely check it out.
Awesome. Thanks. Yeah, you can find that book on BiggerPockets or Amazon or wherever books are sold. If you want to reach out to me, the best place will be Instagram. I'm at the Fi Guy. So at the Financial Independence, like Fi, like Financial Independence Guy. And you'll see my picture on there. And yeah, feel free to reach out.
And I was also going to ask you, just curiosity's sake, it seems like you're working on like some van. What exactly is that? I'm just more curious.
Oh, dude, that's pissing me off more than anything right now. But yeah, so my idea now is I want to do some kind of traveling around the country and stuff, but I still want a house hack because it's such a high ROI. And so my theory here is that I'm going to buy this van, I'm going to live out of the van, and I'm going to still house hack here in Denver because my primary residence will still be the house. I'll just be living out of the van because, you know, when you do things like this, it's kind of, you know, it's a little bit of a gray area, but, you know, I don't think the government expects people to be like opting to live out of vans. So, yeah, it's kind of a little loophole.
Have you looked into outdoorsy at all yet? Renting your van out?
No, I haven't looked into that.
You could rent it. I don't know what kind of van you're talking about getting, but if it's like an RV van, something that you could sleep in, it's possible you might be able to rent it out to people to rent your van. And you could maybe rent either your house or you could rent your van, one or the other, you know?
Yeah.
Whichever one you're sick of, you go to the other one and then you rent the one that you're not sick of.
Yeah, that's actually not a bad idea. I will look into that when it comes time to start renting the van out. Right now I'm just putting it together and I'm at a point where I'm just like, yeah, I might just hire out the rest of it because it's just like taking up so much of my time and so much of my energy. But
you're doing the build out yourself? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I've done all the boring stuff, like getting the rust out, putting the insulation in. The electric part was kind of fun, but now it's time to like actually build it. And I'm just like such an 80-20 guy that like it's going to be hard for me to actually get all the details right and have it look really good. So I think I might try to have someone finish it.
Cool, man. Well, that sounds like a really cool project.
Yeah, I hope
it
works out. Yeah, you outsource everything. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't do it. I can't deal with it. So
I've tried multiple times and I think I've come to the conclusion where it's just not for me. It's not what I enjoy doing.
Maximize your time. But well, thanks, Craig. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Craig, man. Appreciate it, man.
No
problem, guys.
You can reach out to him on Instagram and everything else if you have any other questions. And I mean, just thanks again for coming by. I mean, hopefully we'll get to see you guys soon in person, you know, so.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
Hopefully.
All right. See y'all.
Ciao.